This video is the, I think it's Corona 5 in the series, and it's an article written by Peter Hitchens, who a sort of controversial journalist who writes for the Mail and the Mail on Sunday. He's not everybody's cup of tea, I have to say, mine included, usually. The first article, he was published on the 22nd of March, so I'm not going to include that. It's a while ago now, and things have changed quite a lot since then. But this is the heading for that article. If you want to read it, then you can look it up on the internet yourself. So this is the heading for the first article, which I mentioned. But this is the second article. In Peter Hitchens' article, he mentions a Lord Sumption. He was a member of the Supreme Court before he retired. And in an interview he gave to Johnny Diamond on Radio 4, World at One programme, on the 30th of March. He's highly critical of the police action during the current lockdown, and this is a transcript of that interview. It subsequently came up later in today on the 5th of April, when there was a change in the rules, as it were, when the police were told to change their policy. But I'll deal with that later. This is the second of Peter Hitchens' articles from the Daily Mail. Again, these are his words, not mine. This is the Peter Hitchens articles, which I mentioned in an earlier video. This was published on the 28th of March, and he updated it on the 29th, and they were published in the Mail on Sunday. Now, as I said before, Peter Hitchens is at the opposite end of the spectrum to me when it comes to politics and views on several subjects, particularly reintroduction of grammar schools, which he is very much in favour of, and I'm certainly not in favour of it. But there's two of these articles, and they're very, very interesting. And as I say, I'll read it through. If you don't want to listen to me ranting on, then switch the sound off and read it yourself. As I watched the Prime Minister order mass house arrest on Monday night, I felt revulsion, anger and grief, as anyone brought up when this was a free and well-governed country would. I also felt terribly alone. You could not have known from anything broadcast that night or printed the following day that anyone was unhappy with these events. But they were. So, above all things this week, I would like to thank all the kind, perplexed people who have got in touch with me by so many means to say that they share my doubts about the government's handling of COVID-19. There are, in fact, many of us. If you feel this way, you are nothing like as solitary as you think. Next, I would like to thank all those who disagree with me, who choose to abuse me, often with lies, personal smears and swear words. Your childish, intolerant reaction has strengthened me in my conviction that mine is the better case. If your policy is so good, why can you not defend it like civilised adults? Do you really think that I regret needless deaths any less than you? Can you not accept that I also have good motives? Well, I obviously don't. I now suspect this dark season might get still worse before we see the clear, calm light of reason again. The greater the mistake we have made, the less willing we are to admit or correct it. Common failure. This is why I greatly fear worse developments in the coming few days. When I predicted roadblocks in my column 2 weeks ago, which I did so out of an instinct that we were entering on the craziest periods of our lives since the death of Princess Diana. And now there are such roadblocks, vicious, embarrassing bites on our national reputation. Even now, I would not have dared to predict the mass house arrest under which we are all now confined. I have found the origin of this bizarre Napoleonic decree. A few clauses in the Public Health Control of Disease Act 1984, which I confess I had not even heard of. It just goes to show how careful you have to be with the wording of the laws you pass. If the TV this weekend is full of pictures of people sunning themselves in city parks or escaping to the high hills, there will be plenty of zealots and politicians ready to call for more restrictions, subjecting us all to collective punishment. Perhaps we will emulate the French or Italian stage, which have returned to their despotic origins and reduced their populations to a sort of cowering serfdom, barely able to step into the street. I wonder whether there might also be restrictions on what can be said and published. I can see no necessary bar to this in the law involved. Section 45C, 3C of the Public Health Control of Disease Act 1984, appropriately enough, 1984 is referring to, is the bit that does it. Once the Health Secretary believes that there is a threat to public health, he has, or claims to have, limitless powers to do what he likes, imposing or enabling the imposition of restrictions or requirements on or in relation to persons, things or premises in the event of or in response to a threat to public health. The former Supreme Court Judge, Lord Sumption, doubts that the Act can be used in this way and warns there's a difference between law and official instructions. It's the difference between a democracy and a police state. Liberty and the rule of law are surely worth something, even in the face of a pandemic. Lord Sumption is generally a Liberal hero, and he was invited to deliver last year's BBC Wreath lectures, but the human rights crowd have all melted away in the face of this outrage. So his warning was buried on page 54 of the Times on Thursday, and Parliament, already supine, has slunk away after its craven acceptance of new attacks on liberty on Monday. If it ever meets again, it will be as a poor neutralising thing. One day it may come to be called a dummy Parliament. Where is the Supreme Court when you really need it, come to that? So do not be surprised by anything. After last week, can we rule anything out? This new Stasi society has a horrifying level of support. Humberside Police are already advertising a portal for citizens to inform on their neighbours for breaking the social distancing rules. God help us. If you think they won't get any takers, think again. Northamptonshire Police have revealed that their control room has dozens and dozens of calls about people ignoring the order. They said, we are getting calls from people who say, I think my neighbour is going out on a second run and I want you to come and arrest them. Most people will by now have viewed the online film of Metropolitan Police officers bellowing officiously at sunbathers on Shepherd's Bush Green in London, energetically stamping out the foul crime of lying on the grass. Would they have paid so much attention 2 weeks ago to a gaggle of louts making an unpleasant noise, or to marijuana smokers? He's got to think about marijuana. Others will have seen the films taken by Derbyshire police drones of lonely walkers on the remote empty hills, publicly pillorying them for not obeying the regulations. It's genuinely hard to see what damage these walkers have done. As a former resident of the USSR, the Soviet Union, I can tell you that this sort of endless meddling by petty authority in the details of life, reinforced by narcs, is normal in unfree societies, such as we have now become for an indefinite period. It is, by the way, also a seedbed for corruption. Meanwhile, our economy is still crippled, and the overpraised Chancellor Rishi Sunak, perhaps my MP, like some beaming Dr. Feelgood with a case full of dodgy stimulants, seeks to soothe the pain by huge injections of funny money. He will get this back from us as soon as we are allowed out again. Just you wait till you get the bill in increased taxes, inflation and devastated savings. It ought not to be so. In fact, several powerful pieces of evidence have come to light, suggesting that the Great Panic is foolish and wrong. I shall come to these to underline the fact that it is not I alone who have these doubts. I do not claim to be an expert, but I refer to those who definitely are experts who doubt the wisdom of what we are doing. It is sad that far too little of this is being reported as prominently as it should be by our supposed diverse and free media, especially the BBC, which has largely closed its mind and its airwaves to dissent. It's quite funny that a statue of George Orwell, he wrote 1984, stands by the entrance to the BBC bearing the inscription, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they don't want to hear."